I had just pulled into my own driveway after a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital. My scrubs were soaked with sweat, my back was screaming, and all I wanted was a shower, a sandwich, and 10 hours of silence. But the moment I shut off my truck, I saw her. Elora Whitman, HOA president. Bleach blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and the permanent look of someone who just smelled sour milk. She was already marching across my lawn in her wedge heels like she owned the whole neighborhood. And of course, she had her phone out. "Excuse me," she barked, tapping on my driver's side window with the edge of her acrylic nail. "You can't park there," I blinked. "I'm in my own driveway. That's my son's space," she snapped. "He always parks there." I looked at my truck, then at the driveway, then at her. "Elora, this is literally part of my property." She folded her arms. "The HOA board approved an overflow parking plan. That side of your driveway was designated for Patrick's use. It's common courtesy." "Patrick doesn't even live here," I said flatly. "He's 23 and crashes on your couch twice a week." "Regardless," she huffed. "You're violating HOA parking policy. I'm calling the police." I laughed, thinking she was bluffing. She wasn't. 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled up. I stood there, arms crossed, while she flailed her arms like she was directing traffic. "That man," she screeched, "is not allowed to park there. That space belongs to my son." She pointed at me like I'd just stolen a baby. The officer, a guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, turned to me. "Do you have proof this is your house?" "Yup," I said, already pulling out the deed from my glove compartment. I had learned the hard way to keep a copy in there after Elora tried to claim my backyard shed was community storage. As soon as the officer saw my name, Vernon Laskey, on the paperwork, he sighed. "Ma'am," he said to Elora, "this man owns the property, including the driveway. But the HOA doesn't overrule private property rights," he said, shutting her down. She went red in the face like a tea kettle about to blow. "I'll be filing a violation notice," she spat at me as the officers got back in their cars. "Go for it," I shot back. "Just make sure you spell my name right when I sue for harassment." She stormed off without another word, but I knew that wasn't the end. Elora never backed down after getting embarrassed. She just got sneakier. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got a fine in the mail. $1,000 for unauthorized vehicle storage on shared property. My driveway, my truck, my house. That's when I knew Elora wasn't acting alone. The HOA board was in on it, so I decided to dig. And what I found, it made that fake fine look like child's play. HOA story, HOA stories, homeowners association stories. I skipped my usual post-shift nap and drove straight to the county records office. If the HOA had the nerve to fine me over a fantasy parking policy, I needed ammunition. Not just to fight back, but to make sure they never tried this with anyone else. The clerk behind the plexiglass barely looked up when I asked for the HOA's charter and amendments. Took her 20 minutes, but eventually she wheeled out 2 fat binders and dropped them on the counter. "Knock yourself out," she muttered, flipping through her magazine. It was all there. Every bylaw, every vote, every revision. I took photos of everything and flagged the most recent updates. Something about the dates didn't sit right. The overflow parking plan Elora mentioned. Supposedly passed 6 months ago. But the signature page only had 2 names, hers and a guy named Kurt Bellamy, listed as treasurer. No community vote, no announcement, no witness signatures, no stamps from the city. I asked the clerk, "Are these supposed to be notarized?" She gave me a long look, then nodded. "If it changes the use of private property or common areas, yeah, that's state law." So whatever they filed, it wasn't just shady, it was outright invalid. I spent the next 3 hours cross-referencing the HOA's filings with municipal zoning rulings. That's when I uncovered the real bombshell. The HOA had submitted a proposal to the City Council 2 months prior, requesting a rezoning of 6 properties, mine included, as shared-use residential. That kind of designation would allow them to enforce rules that overrode individual property lines. but the city had denied the request. Flat out rejected it, yet they still sent me a fine based on that same rejected proposal. Now it wasn't just harassment. They were issuing fines using a non-existent policy tied to a rejected rezoning scam. That was fraud. I took everything to my attorney, a guy named Ben who I'd played rec league basketball with back in the day. He specialized in property disputes, and when I laid it all out on his desk, he didn't even wait for me to finish. "They're cooked," he said, tapping the fake fine. "This is mail fraud on top of property rights violations, and if they've done this to you, odds are they've done it to others." We drafted a cease and desist by the end of the day. Ben also filed an injunction to stop the HOA from enforcing any policy that hadn't been ratified through official vote and city approval. That meant anything not properly filed with the Department of Neighborhood Affairs was legally unenforceable. By the time I got home, two other neighbors, Lana, who ran a dog grooming business from her garage, and Mr. Cho, a retired Navy mechanic, were waiting by my fence. Lana held up a yellow envelope. "You get one of these too. Fine for improper lawn equipment storage," Mr. Cho growled. "My mower's been in the same spot for 20 years. I showed them the packet from my lawyer. Neither of them blinked when I told them I was filing a case. Lana grinned. "I'm in, let's bury these clowns," Mr. Cho nodded. Time someone knocked that woman off her throne. Over the next week, we built a coalition. 13 households had received fabricated infractions in the past 2 months alone. Everything from unauthorized porch color to excessive wind chimes. Most of them had paid the fines just to avoid the hassle. One resident, an elderly woman named Mrs. Alvarez, had paid over $2,000 in the past year. When I asked her why, she pulled out a neatly organized binder from her closet. Every notice was printed on the same HOA letterhead, but none had matching dates or consistent formatting. Some didn't even have a listed violation code. "I thought I was just misunderstanding the rules," she whispered. That did it. We were done playing defense. Ben helped us draft a formal complaint to the state's Department of Consumer Protection. While he handled the legal side, I handled the neighborhood. Flyers, door-to-door conversations, a private Facebook group. Within days, nearly half the subdivision had joined us. Even folks who'd kept their heads down started speaking up. Then the real twist dropped. A woman named Dina, whose husband had passed away last year, brought me a letter she found wedged between her garbage bin and the side of her house. It was dated 3 months ago and signed by Kurt Bellamy, the HOA treasurer. It congratulated her on voluntarily relinquishing partial driveway use to help expand community parking. She never signed anything, never agreed to it, but the letter had her name typed neatly at the top with a fake signature at the bottom. Forgery. I took it straight to the police. This time they listened. Detective Roston, a wiry guy in his 40s with a buzz cut and a permanent squint, looked over the letter and nodded slowly. "We've been getting scattered complaints about this HOA," he said. "Never had anything solid. Until now." He took the letter into evidence and asked me to gather anything else: emails, notices, copies of fines. Over the next few days, our little group became investigators. We found dozens of bogus documents. Some had mismatched fonts. Others had dates that didn't exist, like the infamous February 30th notice Mr. Cho found wedged under his windshield wiper. The more we dug, the worse it got. Turns out, Elora had been using HOA funds to pay her son Patrick a consulting fee for parking logistics planning. Over $9,000 paid out in less than a year. That's when Detective Roston brought in the Financial Crimes Unit. 2 weeks later, the HOA office, just a small suite behind a dental clinic, was raided. Boxes of documents, hard drives, and a desktop tower were hauled out. Elora showed up halfway through, screeching at the officers until one calmly handed her a search warrant. She tried to tear it in half. Didn't go well. The next neighborhood meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning. This time we all showed up. Over 40 residents more than ever before. Elora wasn't there. Neither was Kurt. Instead, a city liaison stood at the front of the community center with a clipboard and a microphone. "Due to an ongoing criminal investigation," she said, "the current board is suspended. A temporary oversight committee will be formed until a new election can be held." The room erupted in applause. Even stoic Mr. Cho cracked a smile. I stepped outside for air just as an unmarked cruiser pulled away from the lot. Elora was in the back seat, head down, sunglasses gone. Lana joined me on the sidewalk. "You think we're done?" "Not even close," I said. "We've got a charter to rewrite, and we weren't just going to fix the mess. We were going to make sure nothing like it ever happened again." The temporary oversight committee held its first official meeting on a damp Thursday evening. It was held in the multipurpose room of the local elementary school, since the HOA had lost access to its leased office space after the landlord terminated the contract, citing sustained violations of ethical conduct as the reason. No one missed the irony. I sat near the back with Lana, Mr. Cho, and Dina. The folding chairs were wobbly, the fluorescent lights buzzed like flies, and the air smelled vaguely of dry erase markers and cafeteria lasagna. But the room was packed. Residents who'd never shown up to a single HOA event were now perched forward, pens in hand, listening like their homes depended on it. And for the first time, they actually did. The city's interim liaison, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie Mendoza, stood at the front with a stack of sealed manila envelopes. Her tone was clipped and professional as she addressed the crowd. "There is an active investigation into the previous HOA board's financial practices. As per municipal code, we're suspending all previous enforcement protocols until a full audit is completed. In the meantime, we are appointing a 3-person oversight panel composed of non-resident city employees, including myself." Dina leaned toward me. "Did they really freeze the HOA account?" "They did," I whispered back. "Ben sent me the notice. The bank flagged multiple suspicious withdrawals, including a $5,000 transfer labeled beautification consulting to a tanning salon." Valerie cleared her throat. "We're also contacting all residents who received fines in the past year. If you paid anything, keep your receipts. There will be restitution hearings." A few gasps scattered through the room. Lana let out a low whistle. "They're not just going down. They're going bankrupt." But then Valerie set aside her clipboard and pulled out a small black thumb drive from her pocket. She plugged it into the projector and brought up a spreadsheet. The screen flickered, then displayed a list of names, dates, and dollar amounts. "This," she said, "is a preliminary summary of illicit payouts made over the past 18 months. The most egregious entry," she clicked to highlight a line near the bottom, "is a $10,000 payment listed as security enhancements." A man in the front row raised his hand. "Is that the same one where they installed those mystery cameras on the lampposts?" Valerie nodded. "We checked. Those cameras were never activated, and the vendor listed doesn't exist, which means they just pocketed the money," Mr. Cho said under his breath, but Valerie wasn't done. She clicked again, revealing a series of scanned documents. The last one was a notarized affidavit signed by Kurt Bellamy, dated 2 weeks before the raid. It detailed a private agreement between him and Elora Whitman, an arrangement where they would fabricate infractions in order to collect fines, then funnel a portion of those funds into personal accounts disguised as subcontractor reimbursements. The room fell silent. "She signed it?" Lana asked quietly. Valerie exhaled through her nose. "She did. And that's not all. We obtained cell tower data showing that both individuals visited the home of a notary public who has since confessed to stamping blank forms in exchange for cash." "That's felony forgery." No one spoke for a long time, then someone in the back muttered, "She was shaking people down like it was a mob racket." Valerie didn't deny it. "That's exactly how the DA is framing it." She turned off the projector. "As of this morning, arrest warrants have been issued for both Elora Whitman and Kurt Bellamy. Additional charges include fraud, misuse of public trust, wire fraud, and criminal conspiracy. A third individual is also being investigated, Patrick Whitman, for knowingly benefiting from stolen HOA funds. Lana crossed her legs and whispered, "Guess he won't be parking here much longer." I watched the crowd carefully. There was no panic, no shouting. Just a slow, dawning realization that the nightmare was finally cracking open. Valerie wrapped up the meeting with a request for volunteers to help reorganize the community charter. I raised my hand without thinking. So did Lana. So did 5 others. That night, I found a yellow sticky note on my door. No name, just a message written in shaky block letters. I was afraid. I'm not anymore. I want to help. Whoever wrote it didn't sign it, but I had a feeling I wasn't the only one collecting evidence these past few months. Over the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood underwent a transformation that had nothing to do with landscaping or paint colors. People talked. Sidewalks that had once felt like quiet battlegrounds became meeting grounds. We held Sunday coffee stands in front yards. An older couple with a collapsible table started offering free notary services. Someone set up a lending library in a converted birdhouse. And best of all, nobody got a single fine. The official audit results arrived by courier in early May. Valerie called a special meeting to share them. This time, the venue was the local firehouse because the crowd had doubled. Even the mayor showed up. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she handed out copies of the report to every resident willing to take one. Page by page, the fraud unraveled in print. Nearly $170,000 in unauthorized disbursements, 9 ghost vendor contracts, and 26 forged signatures across multiple legal filings. But the part that hit hardest was near the end. A section labeled Targeted Harassment Patterns. The auditors had analyzed the timing and frequency of the false infractions. It wasn't random. Certain groups were disproportionately targeted: elderly residents, single parents, and homeowners who had previously voted against board proposals. Dina's name came up 4 separate times. Mrs. Alvarez had received more fake notices than any other resident. It hadn't been incompetence. It had been systematic. Valerie stood and addressed the crowd one last time. "I want to be clear, what happened here wasn't just criminal. It was predatory. And it happened because the system allowed too much power in too few hands without oversight." The mayor nodded solemnly beside her. As the meeting led out, I found myself standing beside Mrs. Alvarez. She looked different, straighter somehow. Like the weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally lifted. "I kept thinking I must have done something wrong," she said softly. "I'm glad it wasn't just me." "It was never you," I said. "Now it's over." But we both knew we weren't done, not really. That weekend, the newly formed charter committee met in my garage. We had donuts, clipboards, and a stack of red pens. We weren't just rewriting rules, we were building a firewall. No more unchecked power. No more closed-door votes. Every board member would be term limited. Every budget would be published quarterly. And all enforcement would be subject to a grievance council composed of randomly selected residents. Mr. Cho installed a community bulletin board in the park. Dina offered to handle communications. Lana volunteered to coordinate with the city to turn that useless lamppost camera system into an actual safety feature. By the end of the month, we voted in a new board, one that had to earn approval from the community before taking office. I didn't run. Neither did Lana. We wanted fresh eyes. People with no baggage. And they delivered. The final meeting of the Oversight Committee was held on a warm Friday evening. Valerie handed over all official duties with a smile and a warning. "Don't let this happen again. The moment you stop paying attention, the wrong people start writing the rules." We nodded. We'd learned the hard way. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and porch lights flickered on, I walked back to my driveway. The same one I'd parked in 100 times before. But now, it felt like more than just a slab of concrete. It felt like proof that standing your ground and knowing your rights mattered. And this time, no one was going to knock on my window. The new board had been in place for 3 months when the final piece of the investigation dropped into our laps like a live grenade. I was fixing a broken gate hinge in my backyard when Lana called. Her voice wasn't panicked, just tight, focused. "I just got a call from Detective Roston," she said. "You might want to get over to City Hall, now." I didn't ask questions. I just dropped the wrench and drove. Inside the city's legal conference room, the air felt heavier than usual. The shades were drawn. 3 officials sat at the far end of the table: Valerie Mendoza, a deputy DA named Ronick, and an unfamiliar man in a dark gray blazer who introduced himself as a federal investigator with the Office of Inspector General. Behind them, a locked file box sat on a rolling cart. Lana was already there, arms crossed, next to Mr. Cho and Dina. I took the last open seat. Valerie wasted no time. "We've concluded the second phase of the investigation. What we found wasn't just contained to your HOA. It's part of a broader fraud scheme involving multiple communities." She passed out a stapled report, thick with appendices and exhibits. The front page read, "Joint Task Force Preliminary Findings, Western Suburban Housing Associations." I flipped through it slowly, scanning names, dates, and financial transfers. The name that froze me cold was listed on page 3, Patrick Whitman. Ronick leaned forward. Elora's son wasn't just receiving fake consulting payments. He was laundering funds through a shell company he registered under the name Civic Harmony Services. That company has contracts with at least 5 other HOA boards in the region. Dina blinked slowly. "Are you saying he's been running the same scam in other neighborhoods?" "Yes," Ronick said. "And in at least 2 of those cases, residents were threatened with foreclosure when they couldn't pay the fake fines." Mr. Cho's hand clenched on the edge of the table. "That's extortion." "Worse," Valerie added. "In one development, the board used doctored notices to intimidate elderly homeowners into selling below market value, then flipped the properties to a private investment group. That group is also tied to Civic Harmony Services." My jaw tightened. "How far does this go?" the federal agent answered. "Far enough that we're opening a criminal racketeering case. Patrick Whitman is now a person of interest in a broader RICO investigation. Elora may have been the face, but he's the architect." Lana exhaled a slow breath. "So what happens next?" "We've frozen all known accounts associated with the shell company," the agent said. "We're also coordinating with the Department of Housing to initiate restitution proceedings for affected residents. But we need your help." He opened the file box and pulled out a stack of thumb drives. These contain communications recovered during the warrant execution: emails, call logs, draft documents. Some of them reference attempts to manipulate local zoning officials and bribe small-time inspectors. "We're looking for links, patterns, anything that can help us map the full structure." We volunteered without hesitation. For the next 6 weeks, our evenings turned into forensic review sessions. We sat at Lana's dining room table and combed through massive folders of correspondence. Most of it was tedious budget drafts, HOA meeting plans, contractor quotes. But every so often, something would leap out. Like the email chain where Patrick instructed his mother to target the medical guy again, he's not folding. Or the spreadsheet listing priority residents for compliance action, with color-coded tags for isolated and likely to settle. Or the payment log showing a $500 check made out to a local notary with the memo line, "Documents, no questions." Each piece strengthened the case. The final breakthrough came from Dina. She discovered a hidden folder buried inside a draft charter file, innocuously labeled old versions. Inside were scanned copies of letters supposedly signed by residents agreeing to the overflow parking plan, but the metadata revealed they had all been created on the same day, using the same document template, and printed from the same IP address. Ben submitted the findings directly to the DA's office. 2 weeks later, news broke that Patrick Whitman had been arrested in Nevada, trying to board a private charter flight under a false name. He was carrying 2 fake passports and nearly $15,000 in cash. The charges filed included wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and racketeering. Elora, already on house arrest, was formally charged with conspiracy and obstruction. When faced with the new evidence, she accepted a plea deal in exchange for full testimony against her son. The courtroom was packed the day the verdict came down. I sat near the back, surrounded by other residents who had once been too afraid to speak up. The judge read through the counts, then delivered the sentence. 22 years for Patrick, with no possibility of parole for at least 12. Elora received 5 to be served in a minimum security facility plus full restitution to all victims. It wasn't just justice. It was a warning to anyone who thought they could weaponize power behind a clipboard and a committee title. Afterward, the city hosted a community event in the park. Not a celebration, exactly more like a reset. There were food trucks, a local jazz trio, and a long banner where people could sign their names next to the words. We reclaimed our voice. Mr. Cho brought a tray of homemade dumplings. Dina organized a donation drive for the residents in neighboring communities who were still digging out of the mess Patrick had left behind. Lana had turned the HOA Facebook group into an open forum for civic projects, no moderators, no secret rules. I walked to the edge of the park and looked out at the rows of houses. They weren't just buildings anymore. They were symbols of what we'd fought for. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, not from the city, not from the law firm, but from Mrs. Alvarez. Handwritten, carefully folded, with a pressed lilac petal sealed inside. She thanked me for standing up when she hadn't known how. For making noise, for asking questions, for not letting them bury her voice under fines and fear. I kept it in my toolbox. Not because I needed a reminder, but because it belonged there next to the hinge I'd fixed, the gate that finally closed right, and the driveway no one else would ever lay claim to again. We didn't just win. We built a neighborhood worth defending.